And I now give the floor to Mr. Nasser Kamel.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is a privilege for the Union for the Mediterranean to be invited as a main briefer at the Security Council on such a crucial topic. But let me at the outset thank you, Mr. Minister, and the Republic of Malta for facilitating this opportunity. Malta has always been an active and consistent proponent of peace, security, and stability in the Mediterranean region. Mr. President, at the crossroad of three continents, the Mediterranean Sea holds a distinct influence at global level. Covering less than 1% of the world's oceans, it accounts for a fourth of all international seaborne trade, and it harbors around 11% of all marine species and generates an economic value of $450 billion a year, representing 20% of the annual global GDP. But at the same time, it is also a hotspot of many challenges that pose multi-layered risk to our peace, security, and stability, not least to our younger generations. As the sole intergovernmental organization gathering all countries of the region, the Union for the Mediterranean foresaw the value of working on the root causes of these challenges, to turn the region from a hotspot to a hope spot for our young people. Mr. President, the primary challenge we are addressing is climate change, possibly the most existential threat facing the future of the Mediterranean basin, as mentioned before me. Its pace, magnitude, and impacts on the region can transform into a serious stability risk unless urgently tackled. The first ever Mediterranean assessment report on the impact of climate and environmental change, prepared by an independent network of around 190 scientists and experts from over 25 countries, closely working with the UfM and the IPCC, came out a few years ago with some sobering findings. As mentioned, the Mediterranean is warming 20% faster than the rest of the world. And with the current policy and without adaptation and mitigation measures, regional temperature will increase by 2.2 degrees by the year 2040 and a staggering 6.8 degrees by the year 2100. Today, such temperatures are already above the 1.5 degrees of pre-industrial levels. So just as the melting ice caps have become symbolic of climate change in the Arctic, water scarcity has become the image most commonly associated with this same emergency in much of the Mediterranean. And if you add to that flash flood, as we saw in the UAE yesterday, we can grasp the gravity of the situation. All that with a rapidly growing population and more than 180 million people affected by water poverty. This constitutes a direct threat to our regional security and stability. Added to existing environmental risks, these threats intensify poverty, reduce fundamental human rights, and lead to migration, proffering profound state and human security challenges to governments and people, particularly in the southern shores of the Mediterranean. Climate adaptation, Mr. President, need therefore to be deeply connected with justice, equity, poverty alleviation, and social inclusion. This situation compounds the already known high level of fragility and vulnerability in the region. With a galloping demography in the southern and eastern Mediterranean, and a population that is 14 years younger than that in the north, and 50% of that population is below the age of 24. At the same time, this youth experience among the highest unemployment rates worldwide, up to 3 times the national unemployment level in some countries, with especially high proportion when considering women and girls, or youth not in education, employment, or training. Stark realities that can lead to insecurity and instability. But in facing these eminent challenges, we should neither panic nor despair. It is time, Mr. President, to draw attention to the Mediterranean, not only as a hotspot of global challenges, but also as a laboratory of solutions, one that can be beneficial for the rest of the world. For that, we at the UfM are not only working for youth, but with them, so that they can build a more inclusive and sustainable future. In 2021, we launched a UfM strategy on youth 2030, with a call for action co-built with youth from the region. It rests on three main pillars. The first, environment and climate action. The second, education and employment. And the third, social inclusion and participation. All with a cross-cutting gender lens. We are tapping into innovative sectors such as green, blue, and circular economy, which can contribute to the creation of those much-needed jobs. We work with governments and industries to prioritize and invest in capacity building for youth, women, and marginalized groups to overcome the knowledge gap and social disparities. For these reasons, we need also to better include young people in decision-making processes, not only in the initial stage, but also in the implementation, and also in the follow-up and monitoring phases. And we at the UfM are working firmly in that direction. Mr. President, the passing of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2250 on youth, peace, and security, and its subsequent resolutions stand out as a landmark in moving forward this fresh conception of the youth as agent for peace. Their enthusiasm and potential for shaping decisions is a resource we can no longer afford to disregard. Allow me to conclude by citing the report of the UN Secretary General on Youth, Peace and Security issued just last month, and I quote, "Young people bear a disproportionate burden of the adverse effects of climate change. At the same time, they are also the driving force in mobilizing and engaging in climate action worldwide. This is true for almost all challenges we face. We need to use this driving force, provided with the right environment and space to thrive, and empower it to lead us towards a more secure and sustainable future. We hope that the global community is ready to walk this talk with us to make the Mediterranean a true hub for best practices and solutions. I thank you very much, Mr. President, and all of you for your attention.
I thank Mr. Kamel for his briefing.